Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Aaron here, and we have been pretty quiet for the last couple of weeks, and it's really because I have delayed one particular video for a very long time, and it's really a video covering the deck that I love to play but wouldn't dare bring to the tournament, and that's Miraidon EX. I've got quite a bit of feedback asking about Miraidon here in Malaysia. Folks asking, is it still relevant, going forward? Is it still relevant now? Is it going to be still viable in the new Paradox Rift format? Now, I can't answer all these questions, obviously, but I can show you a little bit of some of the deck lists that have been coming out from the region recently. First up, we have Lau Jitkin's version of Miraidon right here in front of you. He plays in top four at the recently concluded Malaysia Regional League about a couple of weeks ago now, and it's an interesting deck, right? Overall, we've seen Miraidon come very far from being released in the Scarlet and Violet base set all the way up until Worlds, when he really did an amazing run from some of the best players, piling it all the way into day two. And then now it seems like Miraidon has a place in the meta, right? It does pretty well. It has a very strong burst potential to start. It has a pretty awkward late game at times, but it's still one of the top decks that you could pick up and play. Now, Jitkin's version of the deck is a little different, right? We still have the standard 3 Miraidon, 2 Marie, 2 Fluffy, double Raikou, double Raichu. But instead of anything else, instead of Zapdos or Zeraora or Flying Pikachu, Jitkin has opted for Magnezone V Star. And it's a flavor of the deck we have not seen for a while. Magnezone V Star here being a Pokemon that is able to drag up, Manaphy's from the bench, getting rid of it. And next turn, if you don't deal with the Magnezone, it's able to actually take two prizes, using his V Star attack. It's probably one of the reasons why Jitkin favored it, because there was going to be a big showing of Manaphy, I want to say, at Malaysia Regional League. I think most of the top decks actually play the Manaphy, fearing for a Mew EX, copying, Midnight Shuriken. So, all this to say, it could be that perhaps Jitkin thought that if a player sees Miraidon, they might not think of, sniper potential coming out of the deck. So Magnezone EX using its V-Star power there would get two easy prizes. But then again, it's also potentially one another route to go if he thinks that it's something that he wants to strand in the active, right? Especially because this is the path to the peak version of Miraidon. 3 parts in the list. No judge, which is interesting. But it's probably the way that he thinks was going to work well for him. The Mew EX makes a showing here, which at that time was one of the first events around the world which actually allowed for Scarlet and Violet 151. So Mew EX now is almost staple, I want to say, in Miraidon, due to how flexible it is. It's a pivot. It's able to let you win go toe to toe in the prize race against something like a Giratina V Star. It has a lot of interesting situations where genome hacking takes smaller prizes, like for example in the case of Raiding Greninja. So overall, I think a very strong showing from Jitkin, taking this all the way in top four. It's probably one of the decks that, as I said, I enjoy playing. It's just that I don't dare to play it because I really can't stomach missing electric generators, right? Which could make or break your game. But then again, this was the only Miraidon deck that made it into top 16 at the Malaysian Regional League, which was really surprising considering the number of Miraidon that were available. We don't have the data, unfortunately, but when I was sitting at, some of the tables in the middle of the park, there were Miraidons everywhere in Malaysia Regional League. So definitely one of the decks with a much higher showing, but only one converting the top 16. So once again, congratulations Jitkin for your run at Malaysia Regional League. I also want to cover the deck that my brother played, Anselm. So he played Miraidon as well, and he had a different flavor of the deck. So still the standard double Raichu, double Raikou, 3 Miraidons, Fluffy Mareeps, has the Mew as well. But Anselm decided to lean in on the Zapdos Holucha package. Now this was one of the main reasons why I actually liked the deck. I actually enjoyed the fact that you could have very interesting plays with Holucha and Zapdos. And this was the deck that won one of the larger events in Yokohama, Japan recently. So he leaned into this version of it, playing his own Manaphy as well, thinking that he might run into a lot of bench damage decks. But double Zapdos was interesting. I was not able to wrap my head around it, but he did say that it helped him a lot because he was able to pull off the combo with Holucha throughout the entirety of the day, and he went 4-0 before the last final rounds. Things just didn't go too well, and he ended up just whiffing top card by one more win. But this was one of the decks which he was very comfortable with playing. It's also a different spin a little bit. Like if you look at the trainer lineup, there is no path to the peak here. So he's valuing the abilities, of Miraidon, of Zapdos, of Raikou, obviously, and also Mew. Instead, playing two Beach Cord, making sure that he's always able to pivot into something that can go in active and come back to the bench. The Raihan is an interesting inclusion. I've not seen Raihan in Miraidon lists for a while. Probably one of the things that you could power up either one of these very expensive attackers in a pinch, with generators and mana attachments. Overall, I do like the list. It's just a bit of an awkward situation having double Zapdos. Maybe one of those Zapdos could be the Pokemon Go Zapdos instead, right? But all in all, it was something I wanted to feature because it was a different flavor of Miraidon, not something that we usually tend to see. And that brings us to the last list that I wanted to feature. And you might notice, for those of you paying attention and looking at the screens, we're not just covering Malaysia Regional League this time. We're also covering Taiwan Regional League, where I was told that there was a Miraidon mirror match in the finals. And of course, that means Miraidon won it. And we do have that list featured here on the channel today. And this was won by, I can't remember the name, but the player was TDG_SJ. I apologize, I can't pronounce the Mandarin name. So this is the list that took down one of the largest events in Taiwan. I think it was a couple of thousand people or more. And an interesting thing that you might see is that this is not the typical format that we've been accustomed that Miraidon has been playing in for the last couple of months. This, among other things, while having the standard 3 Miraidons, double Raikou, double Raichu, double Flaffy, double Mareep, has a Zero Aura as a pivot, has a Zapdos to boost basic Pokemon's attacks by 10 damage, has the Mew, and has a Tapu Koko EX, which actually doesn't get released in, other countries until Paradox Rift. So this was an interesting situation. I did double check with a couple of friends on what happened here. Essentially, the site releases in Taiwan are a little different from the rest of the world, right? So this particular Tapu Koko actually slipped into legality status for last weekend's regional league. And it's, well, not really indication of, whether this card is going to be played in a new Paradox Rift format. We don't know for sure. It might be, it might not be. But it's an interesting take. It's saying that there is something new that Miraidons can try. And I'm sure you're asking, right now, what does this Tapu Koko actually do, right? And it's actually featured on Pokemon.com very recently. So Tapu Koko EX, 210 hit points for 1 lightning and 1 colors. Vengeful Shock does 30 damage base. But if any of your Pokemon were knocked out by damage from an attack during your opponent's last turn, it does 120 damage, and it paralyzes your opponent's active Pokemon. Now this is interesting. We actually have a guaranteed paralysis that Miraidon can dish out. There's not Flying Pikachu, obviously, that's not a guaranteed paralysis. And it could make for very interesting plays where you have the paralysis lock on a deck that doesn't really play that many switch outs, like for example, Charizard. And you can just follow up with either Extreme Current for 180 or retreat into a Miraidon and hit it for 220. And you basically knock out almost everything in the format in that stage. 120 plus 220 is almost a magic number, right? Or knocking out almost anything in the format right now. So it adds a different dimension to the list, to the deck as a whole, being able to do, pretty huge damage, as well as getting a paralysis in. And you could easily drop this down without having to signal to your opponent that you have it, right? You could put a pivot up front, maybe that's Zero Aura, and then drop the Tapu Koko next turn after something gets knocked out, Dynamoto, or using electric generators or manual attachments, get the Vengeful Shock in, and you're basically locking your opponent up for a turn. You're taking 2 turns, dealing upwards of 300 damage, and making sure that you get those 2 prizes or more thanks to this paralysis lock. So an interesting take. Now, this format was not with Paradox Rift. I wanted us to be very cautious about that. So it's not an indication that this card and this deck will still be relevant in the future. But I do know a lot of people have asked whether or not Miraidon has enough legs moving forward. Based on how I played the deck, and I granted I play quite a few different decks, but for Miraidon in particular, it's still a fun deck to play. It's still a deck that can race at the start. It can get an amazing, turn one going second, and just start taking prizes. It's still very early days in the new upcoming format with Paradox Rift, right? So we'll have to see. It could be that, the Miraidon list has to adapt a little bit, right? Like some folks have been talking about an increase in Arven counts and slotting in maybe a Vitality band because you want to be able to one shot a Roaring Moon, right? Because with Miraidon, you're hitting 220, you're just 10 short off of Roaring Moon. You want to get the energy attachment, knock it out before Roaring Moon gets going. Same thing for Iron Hands as well. Because Iron Hands would prey on your basic Pokemon just as much as it's gonna do with every other deck for that matter. Your not very basic, your non EX, non V basic Pokemon, which they can take knockouts on. So all is to say, I think Miraidon is still a deck we should explore. I'm definitely going to do it. I'm going to probably sleeve it up and play. I'll play on PTCGL as well. But I just thought it was an interesting take. And again, this video is immensely delayed. I've been probably it's like the third or fourth try at me getting this video out. Really because real life happens, and I was just waiting for a right opportunity in time. And it just so happens that the most recent event, just last weekend, also featured a Miraidon list, winning the event. That said, it wasn't the only Miraidon list. I didn't have access to the others. I'll try and dig around for it. If we do have some of those other lists, we'll definitely want to share that across. But pretty much that's about it for me. This has been one of the quicker videos that I wanted to put together because I like Miraidon. It's probably a deck that I still want to keep trying and playing. Whether I try at any event or not, I don't know, but we'll take a look and see. It's Aaron from the channel, and once again, appreciate your time watching. Do share your feedback, your comments, and subscribe. It'll help the channel a lot. And I'll see you guys next time. See ya.